Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the February 4th, 2025 regular meeting of the City of Rolling Meadows Planning and Zoning Commission at 7 p.m. Please silence your electronic devices. Staff, could you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Burchett.
Here.
Commissioner Garkin.
Here.
Commissioner Faustine.
Here.
Commissioner Sheehan.
Here.
Commissioner Murdy and Commissioner Leone are absent. Chair Buckingham.
Here. With 5 members present, I declare a quorum. Now on to the approval of the minutes of the prior meeting dated January 7th, 2025. Any comments, corrections, or items to discuss? Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 7th, 2025 regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please state no. With 5 yeses and 0 nos, the minutes from the January 7th, 2025 meeting are so approved. We have new business tonight, and question for staff, were these all noticed as one item or separate items? Just wondering how we should handle them in terms of formalities.
Yeah, both. So you can, it was one notice and it said you would conduct 4 hearings, so you can go down through each.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I also add
Sure
one
thing.
quick note at the outset. I think we shared this in January. I'm not sure. I wasn't here, but as a quick note, as part of the city's commitment to transparency, we're starting to expand recording and televising meetings of boards other than the City Council, starting with this one. So you'll see the on-air light is on in the back. This is a proceeding that going forward will be made available to the public on video as well as in your minutes and things. So just want to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Cool. I did see that. Thank you for that. So we have, again, 4 items of new business, but they were all noticed in a single notice, as I understand it. So I'll just read the first item of new business, and then we can proceed to the preliminary questions regarding notice and before we get to the substance. The amendment, this is matter number 1 is electric vehicle charging. The amendment would establish new definitions and regulations pertaining to electric vehicle charging stations in some or all zoning districts. There are 3 other items of new business, which we'll get to after that. Mr. Savage, is the file in order and has proper notice been given?
Yes and yes.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing in the matter and to enter the staff report included in tonight's packet into the record?
I'll motion to open the public hearing for the electric vehicle charging and to enter the staff report for electric vehicle charging in Rolling Meadows.
Great. That was a motion by Commissioner Gerken. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes. Yes. All opposed, please state no. 5 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries and the public hearing in the matter is now open. And just for clarity, the packet will be considered to include the other 3 items of new business, right? And we'll just proceed on after the first, just launching into the presentation on the other 3. Is that?
I would, Mr. Chairman, I would treat these just as if you would if there were 4 different petitions, 4 different
Fair
hearings.
enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, matter 1, electric vehicle charging. I would now call upon the city to present its petition.
Absolutely. So, as part of the sustainability goals, there were 2 goals in particular that were flagged as fairly high priority, being that the city plans for the development of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and that the city evaluate its building and zoning codes to support the deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And so the city has been working to essentially try and remove barriers and increase the uptake of electric vehicle charging stations. And essentially this project has led us to, we expressed interest in partaking in this program called the EV Readiness Program with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, which essentially lends technical assistance for communities to proactively plan for electric vehicles. And that'll include zoning regulations. There's a lot of permitting and inspection criteria. There is recommendations on city communications and public engagement. And essentially it gives you a suite of best practices as well as state, regional, and federal kind of guidance on best ways to do this. So the outcome is hopefully that we start to implement much more of a kind of distributed network of charging infrastructure, and this really helps us to be able to, well, by doing the cohort EV Readiness Program, it improves our access to funding and grants going forward. So the program consists of about 150 separate actions that cities or communities can opt into taking up, and each community is given either a gold, silver, or bronze designation, which relates to how many of these goals they take up. And we are aiming for gold. When we do eventually complete the checklist, which the picture in the corner is about 1/10 or less of the action items. So we're working very, very diligently to try and complete as much of it as possible, and we're also trying to right size it for the community as well. And so the program is essentially being done cross departmentally. So Public Works, people in the inspections and permitting office, as well as a lot of people who are rolling out the communications, web development, all of this. So here's a not particularly accurate picture of Rolling Meadows and where we sit in our kind of region, and showing you kind of where the current electric charging infrastructure is. We do have a couple in town, and we have done quite a lot of work approving and administering regulations on new installations in town over the last couple of years. You might be familiar with the Tesla charging station and ChargePoint charging station at Maya. We also have a number of private office charging stations, places like Northrop Grumman. We also have a couple in the pipeline as well coming in, and hopefully we'll see a few more within the Crossroads of Commerce or other PUDs. So a little bit of background just to kind of outline some of the technical details on EV charging. There's kind of 3 separate categories of EV charging. Level 1 is essentially plugging in a toaster, the toaster being your car, but you're just using a standard wall plug. They're very slow charging. You might get 2 to 5 miles per hour of charge. You're looking at a 40-hour charge time. So these are, functionally not suitable for retail charging spaces. And if you've done a cursory read of the draft ordinance, you'll note that they are not included as a permitted charger. You would still be able to use them, in your home, but they wouldn't meet compliance for new development or the new regulations. Level 2 chargers are, you're getting into much more reliable charging performance for electric vehicles. There is quite a large span of how powerful they can be. At the low end, you might get 10 miles an hour. At the high end, you can get up to 30, 40, 50 miles an hour from charging them. So they do become quite suitable for these, 2 to 4 hour parking spaces. You might get 100 to 150 miles, and that's enough to kind of carry on. And then you have DC fast charge, and so these are, superchargers essentially, and they are significantly more expensive, but you're looking at somewhere low end 100 miles per 20 minutes, high end you can get up to 1,200 miles per hour of charging. So they're very, very efficient, but you know, we're kind of not necessarily expecting that developments are going to include these that frequently due to their price. So yeah, as I stated, level 1 not included, still permitted to use, but not, it wouldn't meet the requirements for new development. Level 2 would be permitted for retail use, and we have set a bottom floor on 6 kilowatts as the minimum compliance. You can get 3 kilowatt ones, essentially probably not good enough for retail charging. Then you've got DC fast, so we'd love to see these all over town, but again, it's prohibitive. Just for comparison's sake, showing you the kind of cost of installation and the power comparison. Level 1, you can pick these up and put them in your home, $200, $400, something like that. Level 2 stations, you know, when you're doing lots of installation for potentially like a multifamily or something like that, you might be at a lower end of $2,000 for installation costs and another $400 to. Don't let me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's probably a bit better. You know, $400 is low end for the actual equipment, and then you know they can go quite expensive as well for really powerful ones. And then DC fast charge, you're looking at, you know, all in, full installation could be $40 to $80 or $100,000. So quite a large span of pricing. The next step is, as it relates to the zoning code that we've proposed, there are 3 kind of levels of installation that would meet different requirements. So EV capable basically just means that when there's a new building going in or a refurbishment, that you would install the electrical panel and enough conduit to get you to a future plug. So it's kind of the bare minimum that you would need to be able to install with relative ease later on. EV ready would refer to everything that also would then have the, so everything included in EV capable, and then you're adding the receptacle for charging and circuit protection. So you now have a plug that you can then plug your level 2 or DC fast charge into. Then EV install is everything that will enable you to charge a car. So you've actually got the full infrastructure in front, you know, attached to the wall, and you're good to go. So as it pertains to accessory and principal uses, essentially for cities essentially trying to require new developments to have, actually let me backtrack a little bit. So these would be able to be placed on properties without any setback or screening requirements. So essentially within a parking lot, you'd be able to place them kind of at the property line where they're visible or closer to the building. There would still be screening requirements for any auxiliary, you know, ground-mounted utilities. So some of the supply equipment, you might just have a big box, would need that to be screened. And retail service equipment would not be permitted for residential uses. So residential developments would simply need have those charging stations for private use only. Principal use kind of refers to what would be closer to a gas station kind of use, gas fueling station. So we would be permitting these by special use in commercial and manufacturing zoning districts. You know, I would say that there's very little appetite for this at the moment. It would be a provision similar to gas stations, where potentially in the future, if an outlot development, you know, or outlot subdivision in a big PUD were to want one of these, we could look at it, but we are ultimately not potentially that well suited to it, you know, just with that proximity to, you know, O'Hare and other places. So in terms of requirements, state law now requires EV capability in new residential development. So for small residential, you have requirement of 1 EV space per unit, and for large residential, so anything over 4 units, you know, we would be requiring 100% capable. So this means that, you know, for apartment buildings, when they're building them, you'd need to just lay out the conduit and panel boards behind the wall so that people can readily access or install charging later on. Now, for a lot of the other communities that have gone through the Mayor's Conference cohort in the past, they've simply adopted the state requirement, which is just 1 space per, 1 capable space per unit. We've gone a little bit higher just for large residential units, essentially, because it does have that economy of scale. When you're building a lot of them, it gets kind of functionally cheaper per unit. So if you're doing 1, you might as well do them all. And we also only require one parking space per unit for that use anyway. And just in comparison to Chicago and Evanston, they're both requiring slightly higher requirements than we are. So Evanston's requiring 1 EV ready per small dwelling unit, and Chicago's 100% capable. Similarly, for multifamily, larger multifamily, Chicago's requiring 20% ready or installed for each unit, and then 1 per unit for sorry, reading my table wrong. Excuse me. For multifamily residential, Evanston's actually requiring 10% installed, and then an increment of capable and ready, which will essentially, the ready and installed are going to be increasing year by year. So state law doesn't have any requirements for commercial development, and we have kind of been playing with the numbers somewhat for commercial. We've settled on a ratio where smaller lots would require, so less than 30 spaces, there would be no requirement. Essentially, we don't want to necessarily dissuade people from refurbishment or, you know, those smaller developments. And then 30 to 99, it would be 2 spaces, and then for larger lots, we'd be requiring 3% with a maximum of 8. So a little bit onto site design and accessibility. So in terms of accessibility, commercial lots are going to have at least 1 space that's designed for accessibility. So this would have to conform to the US Access Board recommendations. Now that space would not have to be dedicated for persons with disabilities, but it would essentially have to have a sign that says use last, just so that there is kind of equitable charging access for people with disabilities. And they'd also need to be painting the stall green to differentiate it, and providing signage that would indicate safety information, voltage, hours, payment methods, and a few other pieces of information. We would not be permitting digital advertising screens, so that would be conforming to our existing rules on signs, and they would also need to have protection bollards, which is fairly standard practice. Now, there are some benefits to installing these. There is what's called a flex parking bonus. So essentially, a level 1 a level 2 installed space would equate to 1.5 parking spaces. So if you have 2 of those, you've essentially been given a credit of 1 parking space for your minimum parking requirements. If you installed a DC fast charge, you'd be credited 2 parking spaces. So it's a little bit of, there's a little bit of calculus here where you're kind of, you were requiring an ADA space, so that's kind of going to eat up some space that could be otherwise a parking space, but then you're giving it back to them as the credit. And if you have, 4 or more spaces, you may be able to kind of wiggle out of having to meet a potentially higher requirement. So this could be useful for some of these more marginal developments where you've got, just you're right on the line of how many required parking spaces you actually have. If they installed a couple of DC fast, we might be able to get them kind of back on the line. Now, for existing structures and parking lots, essentially you would not have to come into conformity with this new regulation. These standards wouldn't apply to you. It's really for new development, and essentially if you're doing some grind and overlay, and this is one thing that we've been discussing quite a lot, and we're more than happy to receive your input on. And so essentially seal coating and restriping, you would not have to do that. If you're expanding a commercial building or other kind of substantial works such as grind and overlay, then the requirement would be triggered, and you'd have to get back up to conformity with this code. There's also some standards on public availability, so they must be designated for public use in public lots, and they have to be accessible during business hours, and they must display the hours of operation, usage fees, usage restrictions, maximum parking times, etc. So stations within kind of private businesses that aren't open to patrons can also have them restricted to their staff only. And then enforcement, there are some provisions in the code that basically say you have to comply with all the provisions of the zoning code and adopt also the city's adopted electrical and building codes. They cannot be inoperable for more than 14 days, and this has kind of been a consistent problem for other communities. If one goes out of commission and they just don't fix it, it's kind of just a useless box sitting there. So we want to be really proactive and have these operable and have them utilized. And there'll be basically restrictions on building owners won't be able to restrict them from condo owners or rental dwellings within the city either. So essentially it's part of the whole right to charge, where residents are able to access a charging station at their home. And just for some context, if this policy had been in place over the last year or so, having gone through the numbers and the kind of the pattern of development, the volume of development we've seen in town, we've had about 4 commercial grade and fill projects that were over the threshold, and that would have yielded about 8 stations. Pacifica would have yielded 8. Central Road School would have had 2. Plum Creek Supportive Living would have had 3, and Quick Trip would have had 2 DC fast chargers. And so one condition in the code you may have noticed was that gas stations that receive an amended special use or a new special use for a new gas station are required to supply 1 DC fast charge per 4 fuel pumps. So it's essentially trying to get, improve the sustainable technology associated with that use. And looking down the pipeline, we've got Kirchhoff Road Corridor, and hopefully we see some good development along there in the not too distant future. Further down the pipeline, there may be something happening in Northwest Industrial Corridor, pending the planning developments there. Atrium redevelopment, Holodome site, and whatever spot residential and commercial development pops up. So, it's a trickle, but hopefully it's kind of pushing in the right direction of getting enough supply. So, any questions? It's quite a lot there.
Yeah, great summary. Thank you for that. Any questions?
So the way I understand it, this is going to be only in M1 and M3 then, right? Because that's what I see in the list there. On page 2.
No, so this would apply to all zoning districts.
All zoning districts,
That'd be,
okay.
sorry, this was maybe
Except
not
residential.
expressed as clearly as it should have been in my presentation. So it would be an accessory use in all zoning districts. retail uses would not be permitted in residential uses. But, for instance, there are 6 stations being installed at City Hall. We're in a residential district, but not a residential use. So those would be available for retail use.
Okay. I'm a little bit confused about why we would make it the one where it's EV capable and not just say it's gotta be EV ready. I mean, that's just confusing to me as to why that's, would even be allowed, because let's say somebody gets an electric car and the EV capable is there, but they don't install it. Are we
Yeah.
gonna have some enforcement there that says, okay, if there's an electric car in this area, not the ones that, but in the new development, and then all of a sudden a new electric car comes in and they don't put in an electric charger because, it's done and built and whatever, and then the person has to go search for it. So I'm a little bit confused as to why we should even allow EV capable, not just go with EV ready.
Yeah, so it's kind of, there's a fine balance, I guess, of deferring costs to developers, and particularly when they may or may not be actually charging themselves or using the technology themselves. So we are requiring an investment from property owners, but it's kind of the minimal investment that makes it much easier to install later for the person who actually uses the technology. So this is why we haven't required EV capable, for instance, in commercial, and Chicago and Evanston both require an excess amount of capable spaces. But essentially, for residential dwellings, a new residential, it's so much money to put in the conduit and paddleboard when you're already building everything else. But it's an increment more to do ready, and then it's a larger increment more to get to actually have the.
Could we
The
put
challenge
could we put a time frame on that then?
I wouldn't wanna have to install or make it EV ready if I was a new homeowner and I didn't have an electric car. I wouldn't wanna be made to do
Well,
that.
it's not in residential. Residential, you can just go and put it in yourself. You can actually put it into your house and charge it from your house.
Yeah, so maybe a different way to think about this. So the state act really speaks to residential, and it says that more or less, all new housing in the state, with limited exceptions, will be EV capable, right? And the thought there is if you can't charge at home, practically speaking, you're not going to be able to have an electric vehicle. It would be very difficult for you to charge solely in public and be able to make that work unless you're exclusively relying on DC fast charging and so on. So the idea behind EV capable is really, it's a cost splitting, right? The developer, when they build and when it's the cheapest, they have to put in the conduit, which would be expensive to retrofit in later. They have to put in a panel big enough to fit the breakers, which would be expensive to retrofit later. And then the tenant, if they do have an electric vehicle, is responsible for pulling the cable through the conduit, putting a breaker at the end, and bringing and equipping their own charging equipment. And the state law says that they have to have, subject to reasonable restrictions, the right to do that in these EV capable spaces. In the commercial area, right, that logic doesn't make sense. We're not driving around with our own electricians and our own chargers. So at least to me personally, I don't think the logic is there for requiring EV capable or EV ready unless we're really optimistic about the number of vehicles that will need that in the short term and how many will be charging at once.
This is just new development.
Yeah.
This is not like retroactive. Or
Correct.
somebody remodels
Right.
their house or something like that, or does something to their home, correct?
Correct. This is, on the residential side, it's just new construction.
It's just new construction.
But that would
When
include single-family new construction, right? So that
Yes,
the
the
state
state
law would
act.
kick in, and then presumably the zoning code would be consistent and require EV capable for that new
Yeah, just
single-family.
one, at the small scale, just one space per dwelling. If you're getting into the larger scale where you have a parking lot for residents, really it's that whole parking lot.
So like a single family home wouldn't it? It would be like if it's a multi-development kind of a thing.
Under the state law, which would be ours as well, a single family home would need to have space for one charger, one EV capable space.
Okay.
Which what we're seeing so far is you have your attached garage, that's electrified as it is. You run one more length of conduit from the garage to the panel. You leave one blank on the panel, and then again, it's relatively easy for that homeowner to come in. Comparatively, not a huge expense, but to open up the drywall to run that conduit after it's framed and finished is a lot more expensive than just a couple $100 a conduit.
Garages have panels on it now?
Well, you've got lighting in your garage, right?
No, my garage has nothing. I mean, it's just the wood. You can just see it. So, I mean, it's all open.
Fair enough.
This ordinance doesn't seem to include any language to make ready. Do you have to have a permit? Do you inspect? How does that get handled once someone is made capable with a new or either in a single family or a multifamily? This doesn't seem to address, when they want to make it ready, who pays the permit fees? Is there any permit fees? Who inspects? Is there any inspections? Because once you make things capable, then people think it's okay just to have maybe an unlicensed electrician put some things in, and this doesn't address any of that.
Yeah, so we're in the process of developing a whole permitting and inspections kind of framework and communications to that as well. So per state law, you need to be licensed with the state as an EV or an FC installer. So there is that requirement. There will be electrical and building permits with the city, and we're still working out the fee structure on this as well. There may be, it may not be totally in line with our existing fee structure, but yes, it will require permitting inspections.
Okay.
I don't know that
Yeah,
I
I
would
would-
feel comfortable until this was absolutely complete and we could see all of that information as well.
Yeah, I would refine that a bit and say, so today already you need a city building permit to put in these systems. What Rob's referring to is adjustments to the city's building code that are kind of running on a separate track. But already you would need to be a licensed electrician, or potentially if you're a single family homeowner in the house you own, you could choose to do that yourself. That's true today, that's true if this ordinance is adopted. We try to avoid being repetitive. I mean, anywhere in the zoning code you can say, yeah, you need a building permit to do this. That's almost always true. If it would add more comfort to have that in there, certainly we don't object to it. It's a stylistic choice.
So there's a lot of complexity in the draft code. I assume, did that come from the EV readiness program? It's kind of a model, or what did you guys come up with?
There are bits
the
and
framework for
pieces. They're kind of providing an omnibus of here is all of the information we could take on board, and we've done a lot of work to kind of weed out things that are not particularly relevant for our community, maybe not right sized for our community. So, a lot of communities are, particularly ones who are, they want to get a bronze designation. It's kind of minimal compliance with the framework that Mayor's Conference have offered. We have attempted to adopt quite a bit more of their recommendation, but really it's kind of more congruent with the sustainability plan and the kinds of development patterns we're aiming for in the city.
Have other surrounding suburbs also passed similar ordinances to date, like
Yeah,
Schaumburg, Arlington Heights,
Schaumburg
et
has
cetera?
Schaumburg has a fairly comprehensive EV charging code. Arlington Heights has some as well. There's to this date, I think about 40 communities have passed through the previous program cohorts with the Mayor's Conference. Yeah, and as you can see, actually, if I go back to, if I go back to our regional map, you know, you will see just to the west of us, Schomburg, you know, having developed quite a hardy amount of charging stations along Gulf Road as well. So, is that Gulf Road? Yeah. So all in this kind of section here. So, you know, they have seen good incremental additions to the network over the last 2 or 3 years.
Now, I'm assuming there's gonna be security on this because I have read articles, I have seen articles about people going in and destroying these just to get the copper out of them.
Yeah, certainly something to be concerned about. You know, it's if we mandate that each one has a security camera as well. You know,
Well, I don't think you mandate it, I just think you make a suggestion or you put something in the, when they come in saying, you know, it should be considered to install a security system just to be on the safe side or something like that from the city. I don't think it needs to be mandated because then that just adds extra cost to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm not sure exactly what this kind of status is kind of within the manufacturing kind of
Right.
community with this equipment. You know, one would hope that they're kind of adding extra measures to not have their copper stripped.
Right.
But I guess that's
Well, I know Meyer
something
has
to
security,
consider
I've
as
seen it.
Yeah.
I know they have all sorts of security around there.
Yeah, I
The
think that
other
would have
ones I
to
haven't
be-
seen, and I know there's a lot of individual ones around here that I see have none, so that's just
Yeah.
something that should be considered somewhere.
Yeah.
So I have a question regarding, earlier in your presentation, it might have been at the very beginning, there's a checklist. Obviously that you have to go through and check off what we're doing in order to have this EV readiness. Let's just say there's a checklist of 100 items. Where are we on that checklist? I mean, can we automatically check off 10 things? Can we check off 50? What's the low-hanging fruit? And what's the cost to implement these checklist items that we can't check off and say we haven't done this, we have to do that?
Yeah. So all of these are opt-in, you know, items that Mayor's Caucus will make a suggestion of like, here is a tool, here is a policy, here is a program, here is, you know, a communication method or something like that. You can choose to adopt this. You know, from this checklist, you absolutely do not have to do all of it. Most of it is fairly cost-free. It's really update the website and provide information to residents about grants or where you know, forward them to resources that have good deals on EVs or EV chargers, things like this. So most of it's, you know, fairly basic administrative stuff. Really, there's not much investment from a financial perspective from the city on this at all until, you know, we do go ahead and buy EV chargers. So, you know, we've done quite a lot of like triage through this list and deleted things that we didn't necessarily think were applicable to us. And then, you know, we have already made quite a lot of headway with a lot of these items as well, just having our planning framework in the sustainability plan. Public Works, for instance, have already been quite active in doing a fleet assessment, which is basically a ComEd run program where they look for opportunities to upgrade fleets into EVs, things like this, which get a lot of points
And that was my next question. So I'm guessing the more of the items that you check off, the better your incentives are for your grants or the amount that you may be able to get based on what you're opting in to be able to do.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, potentially. Though, you know, grants, federal grants, you know, are a little uncertain at this point. So we're hoping that at least this will be, you know, enough to spur on some more incremental development within the city.
So you mentioned there's not much cost to the city to implement many of these, but yet you're looking to impact businesses with 30 or more parking spaces, even if they're gonna do a basic mill and overlay to their parking lot, which prolongs the integrity of their parking lot and you're considering that not maintenance, but as a trigger, and you're gonna have an impact, a fairly large impact to their business. So what's the thought pattern behind that?
Yeah, so this was certainly one of the this specific mill and overlay does that trigger it. This is one of the items that we were certainly, not necessarily tied to. There are some benefits to it in that once you've actually got, things exposed down to aggregate, it's much easier to lay conduit, it's much easier to do, certain installations.
But with a mill and overlay, you're not exposing yourself to aggregate, it's just to the, you have your finish coat and you have your surface coat, your,
Yeah, so.
whether it's 3 inches and 1.5 inches or whatever it is for your paving spec. So really, you're not getting down to aggregate.
Yeah, that's true.
So it really does impact the cost to put these in,
Yeah.
if in fact you're gonna trigger this, and that's something that I wouldn't be in favor of.
Yeah, certainly, and that's something that we are certainly negotiable with. It's at some point, you may want for something to trigger this is what level of investment is a reasonable kind of trigger point. So, Glenn, if you'd like to talk about this at any length as well.
If, so one quick question before you answer. If we were to impose that, or we were to say, you're gonna have to do this, then is there any sort of an incentive that the city could give those businesses? I mean, I don't know what it could be, but is there any incentive you could give to them for, adding to our village, adding to, our city, these EV stations?
Yeah, so, kind of going in order to Commissioner Sheehan and to Commissioner Verstein. So I think that as Mr. Savage summarized pretty well, it's just it's a balancing act and a judgment call. Potentially tying this to mill and overlay means that you'll see the charging capacity increase in the city faster, which, if it was free, it would be good. But that does involve, potentially businesses taking on that cost sooner. To go to your question, Commissioner Verstein, and then to come back. So, Commonwealth Edison, through their different programs, offers a number of grants that really aren't competitive. I mean, you just do them, and they give you equipment, they give you funds, and so on. I won't say that it's it'll be true for everybody, but so at City Hall, right out front here, we're getting ready to install 7 chargers. The total cost to that for the city, not tied to any paving, that would be sort of around the perimeter, would be $85,000. We're paying a little bit over half of that after you take into account all the different incentives that come through from Commonwealth Edison to support electric vehicle deployment. So, including the make ready work for the transformer, including the pedestals, including everything. That's
So businesses could get these incentives as well?
Yes.
correct.
Well,
So
I've
that's
not
about
seen
7.
the business side of it, the grants and funding from ComEd support private business like they do for public and municipal. It's not equivalent. And what
That's very
I've seen, unless
possible.
there's something new for 2025.
Yeah, and we can get some more information on that. My understanding is that those, there's not there's not ComEd powering safe communities in here. There's not a special grant program for government in here. This is actually not an installer that, to my knowledge, has typically been doing as much government work as compared to, there's another installer, Green Day, that did a whole bunch of these in the earlier few years and so on. There's pretty good grant support from this for ComEd, both because there's state statute pushing ComEd to offer those funds, and it's not exactly bad for ComEd's business either. Commissioner Sheehan, kind of to your point, some of what we were, the economics here that we were trying to put in balance was, for one, looking at our other neighboring communities that we're looking, or not neighboring, but other communities in Chicagoland that we're looking more at EV capable or EV ready. We think that having a very small number of chargers is more efficient for folks to put in. You know, potentially, if you're just talking about, you know, let's say that 30 to 100 parking spaces, if they are just being asked to put in one pedestal, 2 chargers, you know, at the high end, 10,000 or less in spaces near their building, that could be small compared to the cost of mill and overlay for the whole parking lot.
And
Is
in
that
all
what it-
honesty, you know, to your point, if their employees or their business supports that and they wanna put it in, they're not gonna wait for you to mandate it for them. They're gonna come to you. How many have come to you and said, we wanna put these in?
Quite a few.
Well, exactly, that's my point. If they want to, they're gonna come to you, rather than you mandating it for them. I mean, I can't support mandating this for business. I obviously support, you know, being compliant with Illinois law, but that doesn't comport to, commercial. So, you know, if they want it, they're gonna come to it, cause their business is gonna drive them to have that.
That's certainly, you know, that's a policy decision for the city.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in trying to make a mandate option more palatable and more, just at least try to help the numbers make sense for folks. That's where you're seeing things like where we talk about, you know, waiving setbacks and a parking bonus and things like that, is just to try to make that as easy as possible. Those things don't need the mandate in place either to be able to be put into place and still serve purely as an incentive.
Right, and then, you know, you also have your additional site requirements, which we went over briefly, you know, painting the space a different color, especially with those colored stripings, those need to be done every couple of years. And then you've got bollards, those get hit quite frequently, especially if they're in setbacks and things like that, especially with truck turning and other things, you know, that businesses deal with that private residences don't. And all those things add to the cost. That's where I say if the businesses want it, they're gonna come and do it on their own rather than you mandating it or putting it into an ordinance. So.
And I would say if that's the sense of the commission, if
Yeah.
there wasn't a desire to recommend that, there's still 8 or 9 other sections here of useful things that we think should make it into the code.
Sure.
What was, Commissioner Sheehan, your main concern? Was it the 100% EV capable in large developments, or was there anything in particular, or just the whole
actually,
notion of?
My first item was with the single family and the multifamily, was that when you're making things capable, people on their own will decide to make it ready unless we have a supportive building code that actually addresses how to make that happen and what are the steps for that to happen. I don't see that here tonight for us to address and see if there's a parallel track that runs consistent with the ordinance that we're being asked to look at this evening. And then secondarily, totally separate,
Mhm.
is the commercial portion of it, where state law addresses dwelling units being single family and multifamily, where this is in, they don't have anything for non-residential. And as Glenn told us this evening, you know, there's plenty of businesses that are enacting these things on their own to be compliant with state law. I don't think the city needs to be mandating what needs to happen in private lots. If businesses support it and their employees want it, their customers want it, they're gonna come and do it on their own. And as we were discussing, milling and overlay is something that you do when your parking lot is sort of, it needs some maintenance, but it doesn't need to be entirely ripped out. They typically mill off the first inch to inch and a half. It's the surface portion of the asphalt. A base layer is still there, and it doesn't get down to aggregate where it's easy to, you know, trench and put in a conduit. So,
Okay, I have a question.
I just
When-
happen to know a little bit about this. I don't wanna bore everybody to death.
When
Yeah,
lots
that's
are doing
helpful.
this, do they need a permit to do that?
Yes.
Correct.
They do need a permit to mill, okay, so that would set off that requirement. That's how you would know, you would say, okay, you're gonna do this milling, then you're going to have to. I'd probably be, you know, a little bit on the fence, and maybe instead of mandating, there could be an education portion where you say, we would like for you to consider, since you're doing this, putting in EV stations, and here's the information that you can get from ComEd, or maybe an education piece, because I'm not thinking that if there's not a need, or I'm not coming to you and asking for it, then I'm not thinking, oh, I'm just gonna put in an EV station. But if they're doing that, maybe an education piece, where you say, here's how you could go about this. ComEd will give you incentives to do this. We'd like to see more EV stations, would you consider that?
Certainly.
What would be the process for a developer if they wanted a waiver for certain of these provisions? Would that be an application for a variance? For, let's say, they were a large development, they didn't want to put 100% EV capable in their 200 space lot. They wanted to do 75% or 50%. Would that be a variance process, or how would that work?
Sure. So for what that particular situation you described, Mr. Chairman, that's state law, and state law doesn't provide a variance requirement. They'd have to build it. For anything that's in this ordinance, they could seek a variation for hardship, or, you know, potentially if you're in a planned development, you could, you know, make changing that part of the planned development. Really, aside from the draft here has some flexibility already on where you can put these and how you can put these. I don't know that there's anything in here aside from just that number of spaces that someone would look to vary, that the city would have the ability to vary for them. Probably the most difficult set of standards in here to meet is around accessible charging stations, and the access board's position is that, again, that applies. The rulemaking really hasn't caught up to it, but just the basic tenets of ADA that apply, you know, whether or not the city takes any action.
I think for new development, this works. I think that's a great idea for new people coming in and starting from square one. For existing businesses, I agree. I think that should be more of an education process where they're milling or they're expanding and they're doing something else, and they come in and they ask for a permit and they say, well, would you consider, here's the information. I agree that that's an extra cost to the business, and businesses are already struggling now with the economy the way it is. That's just an extra cost to force them to do it. So for new development, I would be 100% on board. But for existing businesses and existing things where they're already here and doing things, I think that I agree that it should be more of an education process and say, here's the options, here's what you can do. Would you consider putting in an EV1 and you get, I don't know, some sort of benefit from it? I don't know. But that would be more preferable to me than forcing it on businesses that are already here.
Do you mean businesses
That are existing today.
but if they're tearing down their building and starting over,
Then
are you
that's
saying?
different.
Right,
That's different. That's a
But
new
if-
development.
right.
I said
So
anything,
you're not saying,
anything new development,
right,
I agree with the mandate. Anything that's existing and they're staying and they're, you know, ripping up the driveway or they're expanding their business, then it's more of an education process than a mandate.
sure.
That's where I see the difference.
So on like a business expansion, if they're adding
Right.
additional capacity to their building.
Like that one we just did, where they wanted to expand
Yeah,
the backyard. That would have been a recommendation to install an EV, and here's the information, and here you go about contacting ComEd to see if you get a benefit for it, and so on
Yep.
and so on and so on.
is that right then, an expansion, let's say of an existing,
Well, if
Floor
that's, if we
space.
pass this law, then,
that, as written, that would, then these would
Yeah.
kick in.
So as drafted, kind of rolling down the examples, if you have a new building, you'd need to provide, well, a new building that's subject to the requirement, right? So really a new building, 30 or more spaces. You need to provide a proportion of those spaces as with actual EV charging for the public.
right,
If you're building an addition, again, if you cross that threshold, you would need to provide for the addition that share of EV spaces for the public.
That's where I see the
Right.
difference. I
Yeah.
think new, yes, existing business that are expanding, they get an education. Here's what we would like you to see to do. That I'd be more comfortable with than this saying, everybody has to do it no matter what they do.
I'd also point out, to make sure we don't skip a nuance, scenario 3 is what we're talking about, no one overlay. Scenario 4, which again we could carve out, is if you were doing a full depth reconstruction of the parking lot,
Right.
it would apply in that circumstance
And
too, which
that's-
is,
and
that's a
that-
lot more involved.
Yeah, and that's another thing I would tend to agree with. If you're doing a full reconstruction, then yes. But essentially, just new businesses and full reconstruction, anything expansion or just milling or whatever, they get an education. Anything new, I agree 100% that this should be mandated. Because more vehicles are coming out. I mean, I see different totals. I mean, technically, I don't see a lot of those cars out when I'm driving. I mean,
More every week.
the most I see the cars are at Meyer charging. That's the only time I see them. I don't see them driving a lot. I really don't. Every once in a while, I'll see a Tesla go by, and that's the
There's
only.
two in the parking lot right
Yeah.
now.
I know,
One of
I
them's
see a
mine.
lot.
I just bought one a month ago.
I thought that was new,
So
Milt.
if I can buy one, then
Boy,
let's
you
get
got
with the
some-
program, people.
Boy, you got a lot of money. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, I gotta, no, they're actually not that bad.
70 grand.
But I really do think
Different
that we
ones.
need to,
Not
we
mine.
need to really make a cognizant effort to recognize that Illinois law says that in single-family and multifamily, you have to do this. In commercial and other zoning districts, the state law does not make you do these things. That's something
That's
Rolling
correct.
Meadows is asking to put in their ordinance, which affects cost to business.
That's correct.
And they're gonna come anyways if they wanna do it, so.
So, sorry, what's the addition to the city code over and above state law?
When we're talking,
Is
on the slide,
businesses.
the commercial components
Look
are
at,
Commercial.
over and above
Got it.
state law.
look at the,
Okay,
you
Yeah.
have one,
yeah.
everyone has one.
Does the state
The
have
state-
inspection requirements, like do they have to be inspected every year or something, or does the state do the inspection, or is like the city of Rolling Meadows responsible?
The city inspectors would be responsible for the inspections, and they are receiving training actually this week.
Oh, okay, so they gotta get like a certification or
Correct.
something. and
And
then-
is it annual? Is it an annual or is it a 18-month, 24-month?
That
You know.
we're still working on, I'm not exactly sure.
So if you go inspect one of them and it's not working, how long do you give them to, you know, correct the problem and get it back up and running? Is it 90 days or is it some reasonable
Well, it
amount
was
of
the
time?
14 days that it's
Oh,
not,
it's
so it
14,
can't be
okay. I missed that.
inoperable.
Sorry.
Yeah, and generally,
Oh, that's a
you
state.
know, a professional operator should be able to do it within about 3. I think 14 is pretty reasonable, so you can always extend that. I mean, you know, if we take someone to court and they say, I'm waiting on parts, we're never gonna get a fine out of it. But, you know, that's an answer, especially on the West Coast. They rolled these out very aggressively. They rolled them out faster than they could really maintain them. And then you'd pull up to these, the screens would be vandalized, the ports would be cut off, take your pick, and there wasn't a great method. You know, people are relying on these to work when they pull up to them, and then they weren't operating. So we thought 14 days was a good compromise point.
The existing developments, like Pacifica, are they going to be adding any EV stations? Do we know?
Nothing's
Voluntarily?
Yeah, nothing's
Yeah.
proposed as part of Pacifica. Other users in that shopping center currently are looking at bringing those in voluntarily. Across the street, I believe, you know, just in that area, right? Continental Towers, I think, has a few. Meyer, of course, has the Tesla superchargers, and then Meyer was awarded a NEVI grant, which is a federal grant, to build DC fast chargers, I believe, 4 of them.
So,
So they're gonna expand the current ones that they have there to another side of the lot?
I believe it'll be a different operator coming in for those. The federal grant, at least right now, wouldn't let you, use, it doesn't fund the current generation, or the Tesla superchargers you're used to.
Right.
I think they're coming out with a new model to try and get eligibility for that in the future, but yeah, that area would be expanding even further to serve.
Gotcha.
At the
So-
time, to serve different brands of cars, now
So
everyone's
now the ones that are
changing
there, they're
hands.
gonna expand those chargers to another area in the Meyer parking lot.
Could be
correct?
another area, could be adjacent.
Could be adjacent, gotcha.
Right now, it's just been funded, but we haven't seen any plans or anything come through.
Cause then they'd have to come to you to put it up there, wouldn't they?
Correct.
Gotcha, okay.
Well, I personally would say, I think this is one thing that I appreciate about you guys as our officials, is that you bring these things to us, because for lack of a better word, you know, we do have to compete with other villages and other cities and
Right.
other areas, and I believe this is attractive
Right.
to have these chargers. So however, you know, I don't wanna put burdens on businesses and make them have to spend a ton of money, but, you know, I think it's the direction we need to go. My personal opinion.
Right. Well, I think,
Sure.
like I said, new development or total reconstruction, but if an existing business is just expanding, I think it's more of an education process.
A gentle
than-
suggestion.
Yeah.
You know,
And the same thing with new development of residential. That's, anything new development, I agree 100%, but existing businesses, I think we need to come up with something else. Or it's a suggestion, or would you consider,
Right.
what are the benefits of doing it? How does it?
and instead of saying you have to go figure this out with ComEd,
Right.
have something comprehensive to
Right.
hand to them and
Right.
say, here are some of the potential benefits that you could get.
so what's the feasibility of that approach in terms of drafting that into the code?
Yeah.
Is that
If,
problematic, or?
no, I think we understand the direction pretty well, so what we're hearing is on mill and overlay and on additions to existing buildings, no requirement would apply. Still for new buildings and for full depth reconstruction of a parking lot,
Yeah.
they would apply.
Yep.
If you were to put that in your recommendation, I think we can, if you are comfortable, we are comfortable drafting something.
Let me
write this
that
down
means
now.
that.
Well,
You
I'm
wanna
still gonna vote
read-
no
wanna
for
read?
that.
Sure.
I don't think the impact for businesses is worth it. I think that they need to, you know, come to you for that if they're willing to expend the dollars, because that's gonna bring in their customers and it's gonna keep their employees happy.
Right, that's
So-
what we're saying.
No, you're not.
Yeah, we're saying
We
that-
are diametrically on a different page, Glenn. I'm saying no, even on new businesses. There should be no mandate whatsoever because of the fact that they're going to come and do it if they want to keep their employees, and if they want to pull in new customers, they're going to expend those additional dollars. I'm saying that free market drives that, and you are saying that if it's new, that you want these mandates to be in place.
Correct.
And I'm saying no.
Okay,
So
Sure.
we're not on the same page.
I think we can still have a vote. I mean, in my view, EV capable seems relatively low cost. That's all we're really asking for, certainly at high levels, high volumes. Seems to be a reasonable trade-off, and there's gonna be need from customers and residents for this type of thing, and I think the market's just gonna have to come along, and it just seems fairly reasonable to me, and
And we need to be
seems like
there
the time is
with the
right,
market.
but-
I mean, we need to
Yeah.
be there.
if we wanna attract people to come here and live here that have electric cars, they're gonna want this.
Mhm.
They're gonna have the need for it. So if we don't say, well, here's the new development, but we're not gonna require any EVs, that doesn't make sense.
If you want to say that you're
Well,
business
we can-
friendly, be business friendly and stop with all the onerous regulations. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth, say you're business friendly. Business is gonna do these things if their market drives them to do those things. And if we wanna be business friendly, we need to compete in a sense that we are going to be easy for people to work with. We're not gonna have onerous regulations for businesses to try and follow. Are we existing? Are we new? What are we? It just, it makes sense to be,
Then why
in
does
a
Schaumburg and
regulatory-
Arlington
Well,
Heights require it?
Here, I think
well, do
we,
you see, can you quote Schaumburg's
I know, I don't.
requirements? No. So why are we talking about it? We have Evanston in front of us and we have Chicago in front of us. That's what
Right.
we have in front of us. If we wanna do some more research into what Schaumburg and Arlington Heights are, because we think we're like them, then we should do that. But I'm saying that we should comply with state law, and that is our single family and our multifamily. And then I also, if we wanna have a vote tonight, if everybody decides, go ahead, but I still
But then you're
think,
requiring single family and residents to take on the cost.
because state law says they have to.
Right.
State law says they have to, so we want to be compliant with state law.
Okay?
yeah, I think the positions are fairly well stated. I think it's a
Yeah.
matter of judgment. Appreciate
Yeah.
Commissioner Sheehan, your perspective, and others as well. I think it's just difference of opinion, and we're all trying to get to the same place, and we maybe see things a bit differently. So I think we've had enough discussion, unless there's any other questions of staff or anything else to propose in terms of potential changes to the draft ordinance that we're going to vote on. Is there anyone from the public? Ms. Summer, would you care to comment after sitting patiently? Yes, please. Step forward, if you don't mind. Could you?
Roxanne Summer, Saratoga condominiums on New Wilkie and Algonquin.
Could you please state your, or spell your first and last name, please?
Roxane, one N, Summer, Summer, like the season.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Okay, just gonna, it's a simple question. Is this gonna be free to the users? In other words, driving down the street, I see I don't have an electric car, but
No.
The people that use it.
You pay the Tesla or whoever it's by wattage, how much wattage you use, if I remember right. You get paid. It's like pumping gasoline, or you pay for the electricity that you put into your car.
okay,
I think initially when you buy a Tesla, you get some free.
Yeah, they're going to charge you for supercharging and some of these the commercial chargers at your home. It's just charged on your,
okay. So
goes on your
financially,
electric bill.
it's just like getting gas. You're just
Right.
getting a new
Effectively.
media, right, basically.
Correct.
So Mark, I could also add a little depth to this as well. So the city is installing 6 new chargers here, which will be free to the public.
Oh,
So I think a lot of city-owned ones may be free, and then there'll be quite a bit of variability in pricing across for different,
I imagine they will get a lot of usage.
We hope so. We hope so.
If they're free, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Ms. Summer. Okay, any last questions, comments? Can I have a motion then to close the public hearing in matter number 1?
I'll motion to close the public hearing in matter number 1.
Motion by Commissioner Gherkin, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Burchert. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes. Yes.
Yes.
All opposed, please state no. 5 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries, and the public hearing in matter number 1 is now closed. See, we have a sample motion, and I believe, is there enough?
I'm gonna take a
Interest
shot at it, and
in,
if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll take a shot at it
With those,
with those conditions.
yes.
Thank you, Glenn.
I'll take a shot at it. I'll try to do the best
Okay.
I can. If I mess it up, just let me know.
Can I have a motion then, Commissioner Gherkin?
I'll make a motion to approve the electric vehicle charging based upon the submitted petition and testimony. I move that the Rolling Meadows Planning and Zoning make the findings of fact and the petitioner attached to here in Exhibit 2 at the City Council approve the special unit with the conditions that any existing business that makes a renovation or any existing business that has changes the driveway that's not all the way down to does not have to do that. They get educated about the program. All new businesses would be required to have the EV chargers placed in, the lowest one, and any full changes to the parking lot all the way down to the ground would be required to install the EV ready, what is it, EV capable charging units.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a
Is that
second?
okay?
That capture the substance?
I would add, subtract new businesses for new commercial construction.
I said they wouldn't be required to do it.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Continue.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. Staff, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Burchett,
Yes.
Commissioner Gergen,
Yes.
Commissioner Furstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan.
No, I don't believe that the building codes have been put in place to address these. And furthermore, I do not think the impact to businesses is warranted.
Noted. Chair Buckingham?
I'm a yes. I think this is a reasonable balance, especially with those modifications, and I think the time is right for this. And certainly adjustments could be made, presumably by staff in the ordinance as we go if needed, based on the practice out in the field. So I'm a yes, and so with 4 yeses and 1 no, the motion for recommendation to approve is granted and will be forwarded to City Council for first reading on February 11th, 2025. That's the first matter. The second matter, is the file in order? Staff and his proper notice been given?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And this would be matter number 2, bicycle parking. The amendment would establish additional design regulations for bicycle parking, including without limitation by modifying section 122-160, bicycle parking. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing in matter 2 and enter the staff report into the record?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for bicycle parking and enter the staff report into the record.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Burchert. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please state no. 5 yeses and 0 nos. The motion carries and the public hearing in the matter is now open. Now open it up to staff for the summary of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is seeking to align the city's zoning code with the stated goals of the Environmental Committee as well as the adopted city sustainability plan by proposing amendments to the bike parking section of the zoning code. This proposed amendment would make the following changes to the city's zoning regulations. 1, by adding a definition of bicycle parking facility. 2, outlines minimum standards for the location of bicycle parking facilities. 3, makes certain kinds of bicycle racks permitted and others prohibited. Describes the minimum dimensions and distances to be used between racks to create spaces that allow ease of use. And finally, add a requirement that when an existing parking lot is reconfigured, more than just restriping, that bike parking must be updated to meet the standards, the new standards as outlined in section 122-160. As you can see here, we'll keep this kind of straightforward. Based on this proposed amendment, the type of bike racks that you see here that are fairly common or have been fairly common in the past. I think some of these are called comb or toast bike racks, would end up being prohibited because they're just not recommended by the biking community. There's one point of contact with the bike. It doesn't really secure a bike very well. As you can see, the spacing isn't very wide, so it's not really very user-friendly or conducive to, this being utilized very well by bicyclists. Let's see, that one. All right. So the new requirements. What makes a recommended bike rack is having 2 points of contact with the bicycle. So you'll see what are now allowed bike racks will have 2 points of contact with the bike. The bike rack should be secured into the asphalt or concrete. And then this proposed amendment has new standards for the width and distances of a bike space to allow adequate spacing for a bike between bikes for walking aisles, to make sure that these are attractive, usable places that encourage people to use bikes and not just, throw them in a pile at the entrance of, say, a park district building, et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see here, some of the permitted types, they're called U types, and then basically a spoke and a circle there, which provides 2 points of contact with the bike for anchoring. Go ahead. And then with that basically the proposed amendment here, as I mentioned, this would bring the city's zoning ordinance in line with stated goals of both the environmental committee and the sustainability plan to encourage, more pedestrian-friendly biking and creating more parking facilities around the community. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
So if this would be voted on tonight, would all the old bike racks out there have to be changed then?
No,
Be
no,
updated?
just like any other change to the zoning ordinance, they would be, legal non-conforming, not required to be changed.
So this would be like for any new things going?
Any new facility.
Or if a parking lot is restriped or?
So this specifically says if it's restriped, we're not going to require any upgrades in that case. We specifically say reconfiguring. So, if you're changing the number of parking spaces in your parking lot or, changing the direction of parking lanes, things like that, that's a case where we would look for you to upgrade and meet the current standards.
How about if a parking lot is like, ripped up all the way down to the gravel and then done or not?
If they're proposing no changes other than just resurfacing, we wouldn't. I don't think in that case we would, make these required changes. It's really just reconfiguring if you're losing spaces, adding spaces. I would use the example we sometimes have people want to put in, new signage, for example, and that might require new landscaping, and they might lose some parking spaces. Okay. In that case, we'd probably encourage them to, look at their bike parking facilities and make sure that they're meeting current code.
And there's currently a bike ordinance, obviously. We're just updating it to reflect new kind of best thinking in terms of the type of rack and then the spacing required.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, in one sense, we've got the same issue, but on a smaller scale is matter number one. Was any thought given in terms of the cost to the developer and the burdens? Has any thought been given by staff to those issues in terms of what's the typical cost of installing something like this?
We haven't really given it, specific thought. I think if you as commission want to treat this similarly as the last item and, not make these required for, in the same case for only for new developments, not changes, I think that's something that, staff is happy to listen to.
Is it all exterior bike spaces?
Yeah, these are all exterior.
Okay, so you don't count like bike rooms and condo buildings or?
Well, maybe I'm reading this wrong, because Commissioner Berger, I'm probably looking at the same thing you are, where it says multifamily developments shall provide interior bicycle parking facilities for building residents at a ratio of at least one bicycle parking space for every 3 dwelling units.
It was already in there though, right? That wasn't added.
It wasn't added, so that's what people have to provide with a
Currently, correct.
currently.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. So is that in a common area?
They're inside, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I've
Is
seen
that a
those
common
in
area? Is
in-
that,
Yeah, that would be a common area.
in a common
Or is it
area or
like,
as part
you
of a
know, do you
parking,
have like
internal
a-
parking facility.
you know?
I mean, mostly the owners.
Well, this, I mean,
have
is it
access.
a parking, is it a common area, could it be in
A
your
lot of them have
secure?
racks in there, it's a
Spa-
room,
yeah.
and it's,
Interesting, okay, I thought that was part of the new,
Yeah.
so, excuse me, I didn't realize
I
that.
a
didn't
lot
either.
of, multifamily buildings have bike rooms.
Oh.
And I was just curious if those are counted towards like, okay, one bike space per exterior parking space. I don't know what the ratios, I was, tried to read through everything, but, I don't know, so probably have to somehow account for interior spaces, exterior spaces, and
Yeah.
give them credit
For providing the
like,
interior
I
space.
wanna build a bike room on the back of the building, and it's gonna be, this many spaces in there, so you don't have to put the rack in front of the building or something to meet the
Yeah.
requirement of the zone. I was just curious about that,
Okay.
but,
I don't think there's any I don't think, at least last time I was to the library, I don't think there's any bike things over there.
where,
Is there are now? Because there
Where?
wasn't for a while.
Where?
Over by the library.
bike racks?
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't know about the library.
I don't think
I
there's
thought
any
there was
bike
a
racks.
bike rack in front of the building.
There used to be a long time ago, but I think last time I was there, I didn't see one.
I have no idea.
This, the ordinance only applies to private developments, right? Not to public, like schools or government?
Oh, it's any,
It's
Or is it
pretty
it's any.
generally
Okay.
applicable, yeah. We've got some here on the side of the building.
One thing I didn't see in here is what happens when these things start to rust or deteriorate or get hit, as they typically do? What are we doing to, cause them to be, if we're making them put them in, what are we doing to maintain them?
Glenn, you have a suggestion on maintenance?
Yeah, the same as any other site furnishing. The property maintenance code says that those surfaces has to be kept rust-free. If they were furnished with surface coatings, you have to maintain the coating or strip it off in an organized way. There are some really general provisions in there that speak to a lot of circumstances like this. Good to add on to one of the earlier points raised. Again, most of these requirements were already put in the code back during the last zoning code update. All we're really trying to do is make some clearer dimensional standards, some clearer type standards. There is a thought here, again, which we can take or leave as far as being a little bit more clear about when we're trying to get these put in with an existing development. The cost per rack here, each of these racks fit 2 bikes, so 1 rack, 2 bikes is the small side. $200 to $350, potentially a little bit more for concrete or asphalt to be able to secure them. To answer that earlier
Yep.
question.
It's helpful. Have there been any complaints that the city's received from bike riders about existing racks or not enough capacity or anything that kind of spurred this, other than just kind of continually modernizing? And I applaud the staff for continually looking forward and trying to future-proof things.
Yeah, no complaints per se. We're getting ready to do we're looking at some bicycle and pedestrian planning on our work plan later this year, in
Mhm.
part to get some safe routes to school funding. Where I would say this has come up is, we're often in the plan review stages. We're working with architects and engineers who just are bicyclists. A lot of these rack types you see in here, there's a bit of a savings to getting, the cone that does 8 for 400 or 500 instead of 2 staples that do 2 per 500. But we you know, we make that suggestion and usually folks take it. And so we're just trying to get that suggestion somewhere where they see it from the onset.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? Great. Any comment from public, Ms. Summer? You're good? Thank you.
We do have back rights by the library.
We do. I haven't seen one for ages, I mean, but I haven't been there in a long time, so last
It's on
time.
the outside of the door.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Any other
We gotta close
discussion?
this section of the meeting.
Sure, I will do that.
Of the public.
Yes. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing in the matter two?
Make a motion to close the public hearing for the bicycle parking.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
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 All opposed, please state no. 5 yeses and 0 nos. The motion carries and the public hearing in the matter is now closed. On the motion, are we voting on it as written or any desire to amend it to reflect a similar amendment that was made in matter 1? About exempting existing structures that are maybe expanding, or is it it's not a need,
No, I don't
given
think- I think basically
the
what
burdens involved here?
I think basically what they're saying, if the only thing that would kick this off is if they lose a parking space.
Yep.
There'd be no other,
Okay.
there'd be no other event that would kick this ordinance off. That's my understanding, correct?
Yeah, that's as intended.
Okay. Okay, so not
I
really
think
needed. Yeah,
it's not really needed, in
Yep.
my opinion.
got
But
it.
that's mine.
That makes sense. Anybody else? Okay. Can I have a motion then to approve the petition and findings?
I will give it my best shot. I'll make a motion to approve the petition and testimony presented for the bicycle parking. I move that the Rolling Meadows Planning and Zoning Commission make the findings of fact provided by the petitioner and the attached as Exhibit 2 and recommend that the City Council approve the text amendment as set forth in the draft ordinance.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Burchard. Staff, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Commissioner Burchett,
Yes.
Commissioner Garkin,
Yes.
Commissioner Faustine,
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan,
I'm gonna be a no, because I believe that private business should be able to pick whatever type of bike rack they wanna provide. I'm gonna stay consistent, thank you.
Chair Buckingham,
I'm a yes. I believe the standards have been met, and I'm a yes. So we are at with 4 yeses and 1 no. The motion for recommendation to approve is granted, and the file will be forwarded to the City Council at the next meeting on February 11th, 2025. On to matter number 3 tonight, indoor athletic facilities. This is an amendment that would reclassify indoor athletic facilities as a permitted or special use in certain zoning districts and may create multiple categories of indoor athletic facilities that are regulated differently based on the square footage of the establishment or other criteria. The amendment may modify without limitation Section 122-331, permitted and special land uses. Staff, is the file in order and has proper notice been given?
yes, it is.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing in the matter and to enter the staff report in tonight's packet into the record?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for the indoor athletic facilities and to enter the staff report into the record.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please state no. 5 yeses and 0 nos. The motion carries. And the public hearing in the matter is now open. Mr. Savage, over to you.
Thank you. So you may recall over the last year or two, there have been a number of special use cases brought before you for some indoor athletic facilities, one of which Axe Capoeira, you see it in front of you. Got about 2,000 square feet of space on Plum Grove Road, about 20 students per class. Similarly, Meglio's School of Dance, who you saw a few months ago, expanded their shop in the Northwest Industrial District over in Industrial. They now have 4,000 square feet, again, roughly 20 to 30 students per class at the upper end. And we have a few others as well, Taekwondo studio, this kind of thing. So currently they all have to go through special use in C2, C3, M1, M2. So we've seen quite a few of these SUPs over the last couple of years. Essentially, we really haven't seen very many kind of negative impacts from these businesses. We are seeing that they're generally well conforming, well presented. They bring a good amount of business diversity to their respective neighborhoods, and essentially staff feel that we can generally manage the kind of external risks or hazards with these businesses just through typical business licensing processes. So what this ordinance proposes is that we kind of define two separate categories of indoor athletic facilities, and that would be based on size. So under 5,000 square feet would be just permitted by right within all C and M zoning districts. And so this would be kind of typical dance classes, yoga studios, karate dojos, this kind of thing. We've got a pretty well demonstrated low risk of external hazards. So some of the questions that have typically come up in commission hearings have been around traffic management, parking, and noise. And we're typically at the front line of the complaints for these types of nuisances, and we haven't experienced them with any of these businesses. So really the aim is try and improve just one little section of operating businesses and make it a little easier on some of these smaller business owners. We do currently have one actually operating unlicensed within the city, which kind of did spark the conversation internally about how we wanted to proceed with it, and staff would prefer to kind of strategically bring them into conformity with or compliance with code, rather than necessarily making all of them go through special use in perpetuity. So then for athletic facilities over 5,000 square feet, that would retain the same special use category that you would see with all of them right now. So this would typically be much larger gyms, indoor sports facilities, and these do have significantly more kind of external hazards, so more demand on parking, more traffic. There's usually more health and safety regulations that really need to be checked and approved, and we think that this is a more sustainable way to manage these businesses. So, if you have any questions?
Thank you.
So this would just be anything under 5,000 square feet. Would they just come to you? You would give them the permit?
Yeah, that would go through the
to
typical
make them sure
permitting
that they
process.
follow on, so they wouldn't have to pay the special use fee then, correct?
Yeah,
That would only be for anything over 5,000.
that's correct.
Okay.
And how did we arrive at 5,000 being the break point?
Well, the last case that we had through was Meglio's School of Dance, and they had expanded into their second, the neighboring property, and they had just over 4,000 square feet collectively. I think at this point, most larger commercial gyms, for instance, are typically you want 5,000 to 8,000 square feet. And we generally feel like that's the point where I think there should be a bit more involvement with managing the land use, kind of putting the constraints on it at that point, and making sure that it's really a good fit for the community. I think generally 5,000 square feet. There's quite a lot of properties in town that may suit that use. So, you know, it was a threshold that we thought was reasonable.
Makes sense.
Well, these indoor athletic facilities have proper zoning and districts that they can be in without a special use. And those typically tend to be more expensive than your manufacturing spaces. And let's just be honest, that's economically what drives them to the smaller manufacturing spaces.
They're currently special use in all zoning districts.
Well, I'm trying to point out that in the commercial districts, at least those places are set up for parking, and they typically have more common or public spaces for these types of uses. Manufacturing, in my opinion, does not lend itself well to these type of uses. All of these manufacturing businesses have an element of trucks or vans or something that they use, and those don't necessarily lend themselves to athletic type uses. Trucks and, you know, people walking in and out, just, they don't mix well. In some instances, maybe they work, but in most instances, it's just hazardous. It increases the level of hazard, and it's not necessary. Again, these older manufacturing buildings weren't set up with the number of bathrooms that are needed for these types of spaces, and again, parking, bathrooms, HVAC, they're typically not climate controlled. They just, I don't see the vision of making these permitted. In some instances, it lends itself well, and in others it doesn't. And just a blanket, well, you're just permitted if you're less than 5,000 square feet, doesn't seem to be, because what if they're 5,001 square feet? You know, then they're back into, oh, come for a special use. I think you might be able to manage this better by going ahead and maybe waiving a fee if they're less than a certain amount of footage or something like that, and to take this on a case-by-case basis as you have been.
So,
But I would say in some instances, allowing these special use, you may have some properties that can be occupied, whereas they might sit empty if you
True.
did not allow these special uses. And none of us really want empty spaces.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's not good for anybody. So I think coming and asking
Yeah.
for that special use might be a good thing to put in place, but still allow it.
so on the point of manufacturing that Commissioner Sheehan raises, I think the business you're alluding to is referenced in the packet. Is that T3 Tumbling?
That's correct.
That's
yes.
currently, and they're right now in an M1.
Correct.
So speak to that a little bit in terms of the building there and how this business fits within the overall other businesses there in M1.
Yeah, so
Are there any issues
No,
that
so-
you're seeing in terms of parking or noise
they
or
signed a lease
safety?
sorry, excuse me. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
They signed a lease with their landlord a few months ago and began operating, and I think we're a little maybe not up to speed with business licensing processes in the city. So when the city found out about them, it was basically, well, you've either got to close down or you've got to go through special use. But we'd also kind of gone through a number of special uses for this exact purpose, and you know, kind of thought that it was a fairly reasonable and congruent use with these, you know, within these zoning districts. So I'm not actually exactly sure of who they're sharing there.
I think I think that one that just the dance studio, they're in the manufacturing area, aren't they?
Yeah,
The
that's
one
correct.
that-
We're,
Yeah, they
the one
came
that they
before us a
just-
couple months
Right.
ago.
that's
So-
correct.
Isn't this tumbling place, isn't it by where we permitted a special use for, was it indoor cycling?
I don't remember that.
That one,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
I
Milton and
can't
I were the
say
only ones that were
that's-
Going
here.
back a couple, yeah.
Maybe that was
The
before
building
me.
looks very similar to me, and Carnegie rings a bell to me. The Maglia is on Illinois
Yeah.
Avenue, because when they're dropping off, I happen to know they're back there, they don't have a lot of signage, but when you're coming down there and they're starting a class, the cars are queuing in the street. I mean, they are.
Yeah.
They do a good job of getting the cars in and out of there, but they are queuing in the street. And you've got, you know, the vans leaving with the lawn care place and everything else, and it's a little bit chaotic. It is. I'm not saying that it should, like you said, Commissioner Furstein, remain empty. And I think they do a good job, but when they came for a special use, they had a plan in place, and we kind of worked through that with them, and I think that the special use permit process really worked for them. And
Yeah.
I don't see a need to undo that.
In the M1 and M2.
Yeah. Commercial buildings have a tendency to have more parking and public space and things like that, and be more appropriate for these type of uses, in my opinion.
Staff, any thoughts there in terms of the stress on the parking there in M1 and M2 in these buildings?
Well, again, we do respond to kind of the feedback we hear from the community, and we haven't had any negative feedback with any of the aforementioned businesses. The point about, you know, which spaces are suitable for them, we tend to be slightly deferential to the business owners as well, and you know, they do their homework and figure out what kinds of buildings suit their businesses often they don't need high rent, you know, street exposure and that kind of thing. They do their marketing online, they do their marketing on Facebook or through events and schools and word of mouth. So something tucked away is often perfectly suitable for them, and they can operate with lower overheads that way. So, you know, there's certainly arguments in both directions on that. Yeah, but on the point of parking, again, we haven't had any express complaints regarding parking for any of these businesses.
What about C1? I see in the chart they're not prohibited at all. Remind us what C1, what type of density is there?
We actually have very few C1 districts within the city. There's a number of slightly confusing pieces of language regarding C1 in our zoning code. It appears that it was originally designated to be the community kind of downtown district and was never applied as such. So there are a number of kind of smaller commercial / flex office spaces, particularly in the Plum Grove Road kind of corridor that are C1, you know, potentially suitable for much smaller operations. They would, it's not permitted because there's very few over 5,000 square feet within C1. So
That little shopping center on Kirchhoff Road would probably be a C1, right? The one that's right down the road from the big shopping center, the one next to the church.
no, they're C2.
They're a C2? Wow. Thought that'd be C1.
Okay. Any other questions or items to discuss? What do you guys think about Commissioner Sheehan's point on continuing to keep in M1 and M2 a permitted special use?
I tend to agree with the manufacturing, because we really have to look at what's in that area, what effect it has, like we did with the dance studio. You know, we had to make sure that the parents move along, that they don't, you know, that there's somebody out there when the kids are dropped off. So I think we have to have at least an idea what their process is gonna be in safety-wise before we even approve something in an M1 and an M2. I don't have a problem with any of the C1, C2, and C3, but I kind of agree. I know manufacturing isn't a big thing right now, may or may not come back at some point in time and be heavier. We need to know what kind of manufacturing is around there. Is it like heavy trucks moving in and out? Is there something that we need to look at safety-wise? So I kind of agree that in the M1 and M2 that we maintain the special use, but in C1, C2, C3, I have no problem with it.
Any other thoughts? Feel strongly either way?
Not for me.
Yeah, I'm willing to, I know we've got the, yeah, it's kind of tough. We've got the prior experiences where the dance, it was a bit of a delicate situation, but then staff, you're saying there's not been any issues there, and it seems to be, we're talking light manufacturing, but it is kind of tight space over there. So,
I think I
Yeah,
would probably
the-
go along with staff recommendations and do as they're asking.
the only way to then kind of review the parking and the safety is through a special use process. Is that fair to say?
No, there are.
Or is there other
existing-
ways to kind of handle that?
Yeah, so they are subject to minimum parking requirements, which if they don't meet that, then they can't operate there. And the special use process doesn't necessarily, negate that. We can't make a higher requirement than what's in the code through special use. So, I think that would.
Yep.
The rest of it is pretty manageable, I believe, through regular business licensing processes and just really doing our daily work of checking our T's and dotting our I's and making sure that they meet the requirements for the building itself.
What about examining just pure safety issues? That there's a lot of people dropping off and a lot of people waiting around and maybe conflicting with other businesses. Is there a way to address that through the regular process, or is that only a special use?
So typically with enforcement, if they are causing hazards, we do respond on a complaint basis, and that's basically the only way we can really follow up on these things. We don't do like an individual survey of the each business to make sure that they're complying. But again, if we do receive complaints, then we act on that, and we would be making sure that they develop a plan to comply.
Got it. Okay, I'm comfortable with the recommendation the staff is written to make those permitted uses in M1 and M2 then. I think the staff has enough tools at its disposal if needed to address any issues, either before or after the permitting process. Any other comments on that or anything else?
Nope, my recommendation would be to deny it, but
Okay.
I guess that's not the consensus of the group, so.
Commissioner
Away we go.
Burchard, do you have any thoughts on just the M1, M2, or do we want to carve those out?
It's
and
good
let's
points on
keep
both
them-
sides. I think that if you're scouting the area, whether it's Arlington Heights, Palatine, Rolling Meadows, and you want to open a business and it's martial arts or a training facility and the building's under 5,000 square feet and it's a C or an M district, then you don't have to go in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission in Rolling Meadows, and we sit here and we say, no, you can't do that in Rolling Meadows, and I think it promotes, more potential business owners to look at buildings and look at, the size of it and look at, what they can do with it without having, more restrictions or more, inhibiting factors that, we decide. I don't know. So I'm for it.
As written, so that.
I mean, these are
M1, M2
freestanding
still-
buildings,
yeah.
most of them. They have parking, and a lot of them have parking in the front and the back. And you can probably circle around most of them, so the traffic flow circles around. I don't know, it's just,
Yeah.
to me, it's,
But I think that's why special use is important for us to look at those
well, it is
issues
for over
individually.
5,000 square feet, right?
Mhm.
But
So-
under, are you okay with making it a?
Yeah, I
Permitted
think
use.
it,
I'm just
You
trying to
know,
figure
it's
out
a
how much
size that
mass
is
we have
such
to
that-
vote and- get an approval of one or
Probably,
the
and
other.
then if it is a problem with traffic flow or, you know, the city
Mhm.
would monitor that
Yep.
and get
Makes
involved
sense.
in that.
Well, I
And make
think
it-
what would happen in that situation, if there was an issue, then the city would get a complaint, and then they'd have to go in there and resolve that issue. If there were certain things that were happening that shouldn't be
Yeah,
happening.
And
the
what
way
would
of
happen
policing
if
it
that
with-
were the case? If you were getting complaints and we divide these and it's an under 4,000, they don't need a special use, then you start getting complaints. What happens then?
Yeah, so we have, our inspection staff would monitor that situation. If they are causing, undue hazards and risks, then we would be either coming up with enforcement strategies or compliance strategies. So, whether or not that could involve citation if their business is potentially blocking roads. But ultimately we'd prefer to be working with them to maybe come up with ways to to strategically move their traffic better or stagger their class times, something like this. So
And that sounds reasonable.
Sounds like we have enough to vote on the proposal as written. So unless there's any other
Roxanne has something.
questions, members of the public, Ms. Summer, please come forward into the microphone.
Okay, is this just freestanding, or, for example, 3701 Algonquin Road has multi-businesses in that? One of them is a physical therapy business. Would that apply to them too?
physical therapy is under a different category in our zoning
Oh,
code.
okay.
So that would be under
Medical.
it'd be under medical, or it could potentially be personal services as
But
well.
if there was like a Taekwondo class, business there, that was under 5,000,
That's
obviously.
correct. That'd be permitted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, can I,
Don't forget to close it.
we got it. Can I have a motion to close the public hearing in the matter?
A motion to close the public hearing in the matter for the indoor athletic facilities.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All
Yes.
opposed, please state no. With 5 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries. The public hearing in the matter is now closed. Now proceeding to the motion for recommendation to approve the petition and the findings. Can I have a motion?
I'll give my best shot again. I motion to approve the indoor athletic facilities based upon the submitted petition and testimony. I move that the City of Rolling Meadows Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the City Council, I move that the City of Rolling Meadows and Planning and Zoning make the findings of fact provided by the petitioner and hereto attached as Exhibit 2 as recommended, that the City Council approve the special use permit set forth as the draft ordinance.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
I'll second
Seconded by Commissioner Burchard. Staff, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Burchett,
it. Yes.
Commissioner Gerken,
Yes.
Commissioner Furstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan.
No, you are unilaterally diluting zoning districts by permitting special uses that may impact existing businesses.
Chair Buckingham.
I'm a yes. I believe the findings have been met, and this is a reasonable accommodation and a nice, sensible way to streamline things for the public. So with 4 yeses and 1 no, the motion for recommendation to approve the petition and findings in matter number 3 is approved and will be forwarded to City Council for first reading on February 11th, 2025 at the City Council meeting. Now, last but not least is the final matter number 4. Tobacco, vape, and CBD businesses, smoking lounges. The amendment would, number one, remove the definition and use regulations applicable to tobacco, vape, and CBD shops in order to classify these businesses with other retail establishments, and number two, create the definition and use category of smoking lounges as a special use in the C1 and C2 commercial zoning districts. The amendment may modify without limitation sections 122-42 definitions, section 122-88 tobacco, vape, and CBD shops, and 122-331 permitted and special uses. To the staff, is the file in order and is proper notice been given?
Yes, it is, and yes, it has, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing in the matter and to enter the staff report included in tonight's packet into the record?
I'll motion to open the public hearing and enter the staff report for the tobacco and vape and CDB business smoking lounges.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein by voice vote. All in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please state no. With 5 yeses and 0 nos, motion carries and the public hearing in the matter is now open. Mr. Cole, do you have this one?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
So long notice, I think relatively simple concept. It's two concepts and they're really two sides of the same coin. The commission will remember back in 2023, the city was looking at how to inhibit the quick spread of these, what we call them now, specialty shops, really tobacco, vape, CBD shops that are primarily dealing in smoking and smoking paraphernalia. The biggest concern then, I would say now, is over-concentration and proximity, right? We were getting a lot of these quickly. In one case, they're two right next to each other. There are concerns about, too many in one place, but also just exposure to visitors to schools and parks and sensitive areas and so on. Concurrently, the city looked at both business licensing answers to that, like we do for liquor, as well as for zoning. The city council ultimately put both in place after doing a 1-year review. The thought is that, from the city council, is that the business licensing part really addresses those concerns adequately and more directly. When you think of the typical zoning considerations you have, the past example about physical fitness facilities, that discussion we just had is instructive. With a smoking shop, we're not talking about light or sound or odor. Well, I suppose you could be talking about odor, but probably not. Smoke. We're not talking about traffic or parking. They are really, in most respects, almost every respect, just a retail use, the same as many others. But that because of the special considerations, their product could be a little bit different. So the first part of this ordinance, the first side of the coin, just says we're going, from a zoning standpoint, we're going to treat those the same as any other retailer. There's still a licensing process overseen by the city council that involves a public hearing for new businesses coming in. Still gives the city control over that. Since those regulations have been introduced, the existing facilities have continued to operate except one, which really closed of its own accord. You're about to see one relocate due to the Quick Trip redevelopment that may potentially stay here within the city, but that the immediate concern has been solved. And then the second part of this is when the city council went through this licensing exercise, there was this thought of potentially you may want to at least consider that in the future the city would have a places indoors where smoking was permitted. I think that was proposed by a cigar enthusiast to get you in the right mindset. But that the city code should at least anticipate that, and that at least the city council and the city should have the opportunity to consider that. That was done in the licensing. That wasn't really done in the zoning. So if that idea, that concept, that operator were to come forward, we have to have our favorite conversation, which is, well, you need this thing called a text amendment, and then you might get a special use, and you might be able to open your business sometime between now and next year. While we're in here kind of implementing these changes around specialty shops, we think it makes sense to just make a clear path for these smoking lounges. Again, not that the city supports it or opposes it, but it just lays out how those would be addressed in the future. It treats those as a special use. There is some state law and some interesting history. I'll spare you because the hour is late unless someone's interested about how that state law came to be. But as it is, that they have to be in a freestanding building. There's some consideration around odor. A special use would allow you to have some more consideration into how that business would operate, including that particular consideration.
So they
Yeah.
they cannot be in a storefront?
Unless they're operating before, I think the date's October 1 of 2008, they have to be in a freestanding building.
January 1st, 2000.
January 1st, 2008.
I have one question.
Sure.
I've seen this 1,000 times. What does CBD stand for, and what would that store sell? Just so that I
Oh my
know.
goodness, what does it stand for?
Well, Google can tell us.
Cannabis-based derivative.
No, it's a chemical term. So you have hemp, the psychoactive ingredients.
Right.
Some more others are THC. Cannabidiol, I think, right? CBD.
Cannabidiol.
There we go.
Cannabidiol, that's what
Phenomena.
CBD stands for?
Somebody
Yeah.
took chemistry.
What do we call it, CBD?
But it's a non-psychoactive or maybe less psychoactive component of THC.
So that would fall underneath this, so that would be like they would do it indoors to do it.
CBD is not usually very often smoked. It's often in an edible or a cream form.
Gotcha.
Or
The
form.
CBD commercials, gotcha.
You got it, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So you
For-
can,
for
I
pain
think
and
Walgreens
stuff like
has it
that.
now, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha,
It's
okay,
everywhere.
gotcha, okay. That was, so I don't know if a CBD, oh, I guess you have the shops, so that'd be, okay,
So-
gotcha.
There is no smoking lounges in Rolling Meadows right now.
No, there is one in Arlington Heights though.
Yeah, so what you,
You know, the cigar shop
Yeah, the cigar shop.
on Northwest Highway.
establishments,
Been there a few times.
right, establishments,
Lot of
you,
fun. But
it makes me cough like hell, but that's a whole different conversation. Cigar shops would fall into this category. Hookah lounges would also fall into this category. I would say we don't really have any in the city. I do understand that La Mirage, which now ceased operations, I think from time to time would offer that. The city didn't know about that. It's kind of a moot point now, but I mentioned that in the interest of transparency.
And in fact, that's an attached building, that's not a freestanding building, the cigar lounge. It's attached to it, the development.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, so on this
But
ordinance,
I
they would
think
have to
it-
be a single building,
It got
correct?
grandfathered in, I think.
Yeah, so unless you were in the business of being a tobacco shop before January 1 of 2008, you'd have to be in a freestanding building. I'd have to look. I don't believe any in the city were in the right way to qualify for that. I was going to skip the backstory, but in short, in the 90s, we're all trying to get people to stop smoking.
Right.
Philip Morris starts buying cool bars in Logan Square and says, boy, wouldn't it be great to come in, have a beer, and a nice complimentary Philip Morris cigarette, and what do you know, it turns out that's a bad way to get people to stop smoking. So that's the basis of this carve-out here, to keep really just primarily tobacco operators from even being able to offer smoking on premises.
I know of one building that would be freestanding and off the top of my head in the city of Rolling Meadows. That's the old Chase building.
As far as retail storefronts,
No, I mean,
There's
it's a single building. So,
yeah.
So that would be the only single building that I would know of that would be even qualified for this.
The old Steak and Shake is similar footprint to the Chase.
Where is there?
Isabella's,
Across from Lowe's.
yeah, Steak and Shake's across from Lowe's in the Walmart shopping center by Pacifica. Isabella's as well, there off of, is that New Wilkie? New Wilkie. They're by like
I
the
thought
chicken
that was
roasters.
becoming a bank.
Not that I'm aware of. Oh, Steak and Shake. I thought you were referring to Isabella's. They're
Isabella's,
I
that's
think-
Yeah,
think we-
Steak and Shake is becoming a bank, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we had reported this previously. If not, I apologize. That they did get their approvals from the city. That project ultimately fell through.
Oh, it
As
did?
they started construction, they discovered some pretty serious issues with the stormwater management system there.
Oh,
I don't
I
think
did
they could
not
reach
know
an
that.
agreement. Yeah.
Hmm.
I thought that was continuing.
No, it's a disappointing outcome.
Well, that's a shame.
So we are voting on what tonight, as far as
To make this
these shops?
to make them as smoking lounges, and they have to be in a single
It's
building.
two things.
Yeah, so two things smushed together. One is saying, from a zoning standpoint, you'll treat these specialty shops like other retailers. So the city's business licensing rules will govern those. And the second part is, if someone were to propose a smoking lounge, you would see that as a special use permit.
Can you clarify something for me, Ken,
Sure.
please? It says, a retail tobacco store may, with authorization or permission from a local unit of government, include a home rule unit or any non-home rule unit, any non-home rule county within the unincorporated territory of the county, allow the on-premises consumption of cannabis in specially designated areas.
Yeah, so that's just a quote from the Smoke-Free Illinois Act, that we're not trying to allow that, and I don't think we can allow that under this draft you have in front of you. When the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act was introduced, there was the thought that potentially you'd have people that would want to do cannabis lounges, much like you have cigar lounges. I think I've seen a couple articles, maybe one's in Mundelein, about places actually in that business. I'm not even sure they're smoking businesses. I think one in Mundelein might be like a bakery, but very, very little uptake of that provision that I'm aware of.
Okay, so this really has very little effect on what our purview is this evening.
Yeah,
Okay.
smoking lounges, as it's defined here, is just places that are specialty shops dealing in tobacco and vapes and things like that, water pipes, that would be able to offer smoking or consumption on the premises.
Not necessarily cannabis.
Not cannabis, yeah, not taxed cannabis.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, 'cause you got that cannabis shop off of Rawling Road. That's specifically for medical stuff, correct? Nature care or something?
That
like
is medical and recreational.
Right.
And when you walk in, they have a lounge area.
I don't think they smoke in that lounge area. I
No,
haven't been
it's just
inside.
kind of like
Yeah.
a little airlock before you can get in the other place, but it's just kind of interesting.
I think that's made for, they have I haven't been in that establishment. Many of these have like the glass and security and things, and that's to make sure they're carting people on the way in, so
Yeah,
I'm sure
you
they
get
want that
carded.
comfortable.
Yeah, you get carted in the vestibule, and then they let you into this little area that has couches, and nobody's in there, and then you
Oh.
wait to go into the area where you can buy cannabis.
think
I haven't
because
been
by
in a company,
law,
so it's
they
kind of
can't-
interesting.
They can
Yeah.
only
So-
let a certain
Right.
amount
Yeah,
of
'cause they can
people
only
in,
let 'em
so
out.
you might have to wait in that little lounge
Exactly,
area.
and I was like, oh, well, are they gonna allow people to sit in there and
Smoke? No.
partake or do whatever they do?
All
I
right.
just wanted to see what it looked
Yeah.
like in there, it's kind of
So in order
interesting.
to allow these businesses to have smoking on premises, we want to make that a special use. Otherwise, the smoking vape CBD shops will fall under the business license, which the city will handle.
They are really, these are two unrelated things on the same topic. So these retailers are currently treated as a special use and are subject to this business licensing scheme. And the staff recommendation is you don't need the zoning part on top. You can just let the business license rules the city has govern those. On the smoking lounge side, those rules govern those, right? But it's just, right now, if someone were to come in, it would be an extended zoning process to make rules for them. We think it makes sense just to treat them as a special use, and we're not particularly advocating for them or expect one to come in. The thought is just let them have a clear
Have
path
something in place.
instead of being ambiguous.
Okay.
And I thought I saw in the city council minutes from the prior meetings where this topic came up, that there was a business potentially interested in opening a
From time
smoking
to
lounge? Was it hookah lounge?
yeah, at that time there was that business proposal did not come
Okay,
together.
so there's nothing kind of live imminent that you guys are aware of.
The old
Serendipitously,
Horse.
I did receive a visit from a gentleman today who was looking to buy the Isabella's site and was wanting to know if hookah lounges were permitted. I said, wait a minute.
Yeah. Let's talk.
I should
determined.
mention, we get,
Sure.
not about that specific property, I would say we get 2 or 3 of those inquiries a year. They haven't gone anywhere yet.
Sure. I thought when we addressed the retail smoke shops and we passed the zoning ordinance, we had in the zoning piece limits on number of establishments and space distances, but I don't see that in there. I know it's in obviously the business licensing, which would continue on, and that's kind of the substance of it. But am I misremembering that? I thought we
You
had,
remember it correctly, but there were two already close together.
but there's nothing in the ordinance that,
You're remembering it correctly, and this I can't
Not that it
recount it
matters,
totally
but-
it's 2 years ago. It's right
Yeah.
when I got to the city. This group had made a recommendation up to the city council, and there was just a lot of uncertainty about how to move forward at the city council level. You know, my recommendation was business licensing is better suited for that.
okay.
I think they shrunk the zoning part of that down drastically when they shifted to the business license part. Again, really the same rules in substance, right? Just
That
different
makes
parts
sense.
of the code.
So the city council disregarded what we did.
They
As
regarded it
is their
so
right.
well, they put it earlier in the code.
Exactly. Got
You
to
get
the
to the
same
good part
place.
first.
Right. Any other questions? I mean, I think this is pretty clear, and it's a nice artful way to handle these two issues together, in my view, so I think it makes sense.
Want to open it to the public?
Yes. Anybody from the public,
Just a real quick question, right?
please come forward. If you
If you can.
We need a cordless mic.
Yeah.
You do.
Okie dokie. I don't know if this is related directly or not, but do we have to allow smoking lounges by law? Do we have to?
Not that I'm aware of.
So where does the city stand with this? It sounds to me like we're giving them an open door, but we're really not. The screen door's closed.
Well, it would be a special use, and it would also be only in freestanding buildings, which I
Right.
think is gonna limit this, practically speaking.
And they
A
have
lot.
to meet the business license requirements as well, which I
Right.
would imagine are somewhat stringent, somewhat.
It's comparable to the city's liquor licensing
Yeah.
process. So many people could do it, but it takes time and money.
There's a,
Mhm.
Okay.
I saw references to extensive background checks for the proprietors, so there's a lot of hoops to
A
jump
lot of
through.
hurdles, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna have a lot of these.
But we really
knock on
don't.
wood.
Care to have those kind of businesses in our city?
Yeah, no, we
But I think it's good just to set up the framework, just
Mhm.
in case that there's at least a process, albeit not an easy one. Thank you for that comment. Anything else? Can I have a motion then to close the public hearing in the matter?
I'll motion to close the public hearing in the matter of the tobacco, vape, and CBD businesses, smoking lounges.
Motion by Commissioner Gherkin. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Burchard. By voice vote, all in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please state no. With 5 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries, and the public hearing in the matter number 4 is now closed. We have a motion for recommendation to approve the petition and findings in the file. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion for the tobacco, vape, and CBD businesses, smoking lounges. Based upon the submitted petition and testimony presented, I move that the Rolling Meadows Planning and Zoning Commission make the findings of fact provided by the petitioner and the attached exhibit hereto as Exhibit 2 and recommend the city council approve the text amendment as set forth in the draft ordinance.
Motion by Commissioner Gerken. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein. Mr. Cole, could you please call the roll? Or Mr. Savage?
Sure. Commissioner Burchard.
Yes.
Commissioner Gerken.
Yes.
Commissioner Sheehan.
Yes.
Commissioner Furstein.
Yes.
Chair Buckingham.
I'm a yes. So with 5 yeses and 0 noes, the motion carries, and the motion for recommendation to approve the petition finding is approved and will be forwarded to City Council for first reading at their next meeting on February 11th, 2025. That now concludes the 4 new matters. Staff, any new business or updates on existing business or items to share at this time?
Yeah, briefly, as you might have gathered from the agenda, we had a bunch of cleanup items we were trying to take care of this evening, so we appreciate your patience on some of this housekeeping, proactive improvement work. That is in part because we're expecting the next 2 to 3 months to be relatively busy on the committee's agenda. As you talked about last month, we anticipate bringing you the Kirchhoff Road corridor plan in adoption-ready form at your next meeting in March. We're hoping to have that draft back any day now. We'll do a bit of staff review internally, and we make sure it's QA'd right. We'll get the copy. As soon as we're ready to let it out, you'll see a bunch of information out there in the public sphere too, as we try to bring a little bit more attention to this. Concurrently with that, kind of in line with the moratorium, we'll be bringing you the first draft of, in the form of a hearing to let you work on it if you like, of the new zoning district recommended by that plan. That zoning district, I don't think there'll be any surprises there. It's been talked about, but what the level of specificity that's in the planning document is about how it looks in draft, but you'll have some time to work with that. If you need to, you'll have potentially a second meeting in April to work on that, or more if necessary, for that moratorium clock ends at the end of April. There'll be some landscaping items that we're trying to break off and defer a little bit, that our consultant recommended as part of all this, and also some comprehensive plan adjustments in Gulf Road that I think we spoke to the commission about in November. Again, we'll try to push that off a little later towards the summer, but we know that there's some activity coming up on Gulf Road that we'd like to have that plan in place for. So lots going on these next 2 to 3 months, in addition to whatever petitions, third-party private business petitions come through. We'll try to continue to manage this and keep these meetings from going too long, and that's why we appreciate your diligence this evening in helping us, all in the city get through some of these items on the list.
Perfect. No, I appreciate the staff's diligence and forward-looking with these items tonight, and it's good to continuously, as you guys well know, take a look at the code and see where it needs to be improved and addressed, given what you guys are seeing on the ground. So appreciate you doing that. Do you think the next meeting it's just going to be the review of the Kirchhoff Road plus the new zoning?
So in total, right now at the next meeting, we expect the Kirchhoff Road corridor plan in the form of a public hearing, the rezoning of the corridor, again, in the form of a public hearing, and then potentially there is a special use permit for a private school conversion that may or may not be ready. We think they're pretty close. We're going to try to put them on the agenda if we can. Depending on how things look, we may try to put them first to sort of get them in and get them out before the bulk of your work.
Got it.
So
Okay.
is that an existing school here?
I've not dealt too much with this project. I'll give it to Mr. Savage.
No, so they're an existing business, but a not-for-profit actually, but they are. I believe they have a couple of different facilities. They do predominantly distance education and kind of on-site counselling and small group tutoring for mostly at-risk youth and youth with with psychological disabilities. So ultimately, it's not a typical school at all. We would, it'd be good to have a different category for them, but as it is, it's a special use within that zoning district.
Okay. All right. This gives us an
Yeah.
idea. That's helpful.
Looking forward to it. Okay. With that being said, can I have a motion to close, to adjourn tonight's meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 4th, 2025.
Motion by Commissioner Gherkin, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Furstein, by voice vote. All in favor, please state yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, please state no. With 5 yeses and 0 nos, the motion carries and tonight's meeting is adjourned. As of 9:20 p.m., the commission's next meeting will be
March
on March 4th, 2025 at 7 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you.